And we're hearing more from some of the other artists who were involved on that night. Drake finally releasing a statement after many calls from fans who were saying that he shouldn't remain silent. He was definitely involved in all of this. This is a statement that he posted to his Instagram. He says, "I've spent the past few days trying to wrap my mind around this devastating tragedy. I hate resorting to this platform to express an emotion as delicate as grief, but this is where I find myself. My heart is broken for the families and friends of those who lost their lives, and for anyone who is suffering. I will continue to pray for all of them and will be of service in any way I can. May God be with you all." So again, the latest from Drake as he was a surprise guest at Astroworld on that evening. Like we said, this is the first statement and the first time we are hearing from Drake, although we have heard from Travis Scott about all of this in the midst of all of these lawsuits that have been filed, not only against Travis Scott, but also against Drake as well. So who is going to be held liable for all of this? This is the main question that we keep on asking. So we like to bring on all of these experts. Andrew Kraft spoke with a legal expert about what could be next in all of these lawsuits that are being filed. Take a listen.
Being joined by liability attorney and legal expert Matthew Haken. Matthew, so good to see you. Thanks for being with us on this Monday night. My first question to you, we've seen a lot being talked about since Travis Scott was the headliner in this. He was kind of the key producer and promoter of this. What type of liability is he facing?
I think there's definitely going to be a lawsuit against him. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I got you. Yes, thank you.
Okay, there's a bit of an echo on my end, but any entity who had a duty to keep the premises safe could be held liable. And as the performer, he absolutely could be held liable. I mean, all you need is one expert witness, someone who's an expert in concert security, to say that the person on stage has a duty to see what's going on in the crowd and make sure everyone's safe. Then he absolutely face liability. And there was a statement from him saying he didn't know what was going on. In negligence cases, as long as you can make the argument that he should have known what was going on, then he absolutely could be held liable.
You know, Matthew, we were showing earlier on the stream to our viewers this press conference from an attorney now representing a family who lost their 21-year-old son over the weekend. And they're representing a number of people who are also injured in this. They're going to be suing Travis Scott. They're going to be suing Live Nation, the event organizer. My question to you is, how much of the responsibility is borne by more Live Nation rather than Travis Scott? Because Travis Scott initially is, the face of this, but Live Nation handles all the details, from what I understand.
I mean, ultimately, that would be decided by a jury if the case were to go that far. But it's, the apportionment of fault would come down to who knew what, who was supposed to do what. There were probably some contracts beforehand that divided up who was going to have responsibility for what at the concert. I would say that Live Nation and any security company that was involved most likely would be found to be more responsible than the performers on stage, because the performers are supposed to just be trying to perform. So I would say that Live Nation would have more responsibility than the people who are on stage.
And that lawyer today in Houston brought up an interesting point, and he was kind of showcasing previous examples of Travis Scott concerts where Travis Scott in kind of social media footage appeared to entice and kind of bring a lot of the crowd on the stage, going past security, really kind of stoking some of this chaos in previous concerts that he's been at. Could they use that against him?
Absolutely. I saw a report, I don't know if it's true, I saw it online today, that said he was actually charged with a crime of inciting a riot in a prior incident, and he pled guilty to something like disorderly conduct or inciting a riot. So that could absolutely be used against him. That could be used against the promoters as well, that they brought someone on stage who they should have known, either they knew or should have known, was going to cause a danger, could cause a danger to the crowd. That could definitely be used even if it's not admitted at trial, the jury would certainly know about it just from Googling it. So that definitely does not look good for him or for any of the other defendants that they let this person on stage who really had a history of doing this.
Yeah, and Matthew, you know, things like this have happened before, especially at concerts. Right. This is not, you know, it's rare, but it has happened before. And so Live Nation must be somewhat prepared for, you know, an event or a catastrophe of this nature. Don't you think they are? Don't they have those protections against them as an organization?
Absolutely. This is such a tragedy. You know, my heart goes out to the families involved, the people who are injured. This is so preventable. There have been so many other incidents like this. I was living in Rhode Island at the time of the Station nightclub fire, and there should be checks in place. Whoever is the insurance company for Live Nation should have been there and done a check to make sure that this sort of thing did not happen. There are all sorts of things that go on with crowd control and where people can go and where security is supposed to stand, and it's just completely preventable. The fact that it happened and it was just so right out there in the open and people were crushed, it's completely preventable, and it should just never have happened.
And Matthew, so we're getting reports today that Travis Scott, he's been issuing statements throughout the weekend, and we're hearing that he's going to cover funeral expenses. They're going to refund everyone's tickets for the music festival itself. Will that be enough?
I definitely don't think that will be enough. I assume he was probably advised by a lawyer to do that, because ultimately this would be decided by a jury. So it's really a public relations question at this point. But this is going to be a multi-million-dollar case, perhaps even in the tens or hundreds of millions when it's all over. The death cases are really sad, and something that I haven't heard anyone else bring up so far. In a death case, especially in a crushing case like this, one of the items of damages is how long did the person suffer from the moment of impact until the moment they either died or went brain dead. I know that's really gruesome, kind of ghoulish stuff, but that's where some of the big money comes from in these cases. And I had a crushing death that settled last year in New York. A poor guy was at a construction site, a 2,000-pound window tipped over and crushed him. And the question in these kind of cases is, how long did the person suffer? Were they killed instantly, or did they suffer in agonizing pain? And it's you know, I apologize, it's so gruesome, but a quick death is not worth as much as a slow agonizing death. And what it will come down to is witness testimony. Do you have testimony of someone saying that as the person was being crushed, they were screaming? Were they yelling out, you know, tell my wife I love her, with gurgling blood, anything like that? Or was it a quick, you know, they got stomped on the head and they went out? And it will also come down to the medical records, where it might become a battle of the experts, where one doctor is saying, the doctor probably for the insurance companies, for Live Nation, will say, well, this person died instantly. And the plaintiff's lawyers will have someone who say, no, I can tell from these records that the person was actually suffering for several minutes before they expired.
Wow, that is quite a morbid legal distinction.
Many millions of dollars.
Yeah, quite a morbid legal distinction there. But, you know, will it be easier, though, for lawyers to make the case rather than in your case that you just cited? That was on a work site. Not as many people would be around. This is a crowd of thousands of people. There's so much cell phone video, right, social media content posted during it. Does that make the case?
I think that case will be easier to prove than, for example, my case where it was not on video.
Sure.
Any sort of video will be probably really damning evidence that this should not have happened. I mean, it's sort of obvious at a concert this sort of thing isn't supposed to happen. But any video, I mean, you know, if you go to a concert now, you see everybody's got their phone out and they're filming. Probably going to be hundreds of different angles, and maybe they'll be able to see exactly where and how this thing started. So I think that will absolutely make it an easier case to prove for the liability, and then also for the damages, because if you have cell phone video of somebody screaming as they're being trampled and they're, you know, in their last moments of their life, going through this really awful suffering, that will just, you can imagine playing that in front of a jury. I don't think anybody on the insurance side, the defense side for Live Nation would want to have that case go to trial.
Matthew, I know you have to go soon, but my last question is: does a tragedy like this, you know, change anything for, you know, a lawyer of your background, or a company or an organization when they're, you know, talking with lawyers about setting themselves up so they don't have to incur massive damages to families who lose loved ones. Is this a watershed moment for, liability law? What do you think? Or are they prepared? It's written, they know what to do.
You're talking about for lawyers on the side of the people promoting the concerts?
Correct.
Yeah, I think going forward, anybody promoting a concert is going to be hopefully much more careful. I mean, you saw after the Station nightclub fire 20 years ago, where the people were burned to death. I think that was a watershed moment as far as using pyrotechnics in concerts. And I would hope that something like this would make people be much more aware of crowd safety and hiring the right amount of security to make sure that there's no crowd surge, and hopefully stop the kind of incitement that I believe we've seen from the performer. So I think going forward, people will be tend to be more safe, and especially the risk managers and the underwriters, people who are writing insurance for these kind of events, they're going to want to make sure that this doesn't happen so they don't have to pay out huge claims. Yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see, if, the organizers claim that, they had everything in place, security protocols, right, the right amount of security guards, the right amount of barricades set up, first aid stations, what have you. How can they foresee their, performer incite a crowd? I mean, that's not something they would be looking for.
Well, I mean, that is the question in personal injury cases. What is foreseeable? If it's something completely crazy happened, like it's a beautiful day and all of a sudden there's a lightning strike and it starts a fire and there's a stampede, that's not foreseeable. But something like this, a stampede at a concert, especially where the main performer has a history of inciting the crowd, I think it's very foreseeable. And the fact that there was a crowd surge, it's kind of like obvious that something went wrong. This just shouldn't happen. And I think it's very foreseeable. And I think that they're going to have to settle these cases because they can't let this case go to trial.